Today, we are on an adventure in spirituality. We are studying the book Embracing Uncertainty by Susan Jeffers, and we are in the chapter called Embracing the Learning. Embracing the Learning. There is a unity teaching that I would say is universally taught in unity centers. And that teaching, that principle, is to find the good, to step into our co-creative power of finding the good. Now, in the human condition, we can think, if I find the good, if I focus too much on that, then I'm not going to be able to fix everything that's wrong. I'm not going to be able to fix the problems. I'm not going to be able to address everything. If I just find the good, I can be a Pollyanna. Now, there may be some truth to that possibility that we're at risk of being a Pollyanna if we're just looking for the good all the time, but only if we're looking at the good and resisting what we call the bad. And instead of also embracing the learning from what we experience as negative, we are pushing it away. That's the only risk in finding the good. So if we are willing to see life and to engage life from the idea that everything has something for us, we are in fact practicing the principles. The Buddha said every experience, no matter how bad it seems, holds within it a blessing of some kind. The goal is to find it. Every experience holds a blessing, and the goal is to find it. See, we have a buffet of things that we can feast on with our minds. And the things we go to more are refilled at the buffet station. It is ours to choose what we focus on. That doesn't mean that we deny our pain. That doesn't mean that we deny suffering. That doesn't mean that we don't look at these things, but we look at these things with an intention to love, an intention to grow, an intention to learn, and an intention to serve. And that is how we approach and address this mind experience that the human condition has of judging everything as good or bad. Here it is, something's good. Oh, here it is, something's bad. That is just what the mind does. But when we come to something that we consider not good, even bad, or horrific, our opportunity to apply spiritual principle is right up there with our opportunity to find the good. Now, Susan Jeffers in her book says, if we embrace the good that can come from whatever life hands us, we've come a long way in learning how to embrace uncertainty. In Unity Speak and New Thought Speak, we might hear the quote a lot, it's all good, it's all God. Has anyone heard that one? It's all good, it's all God. Thumbs up if you love it, thumbs down if you loathe it. Up or down. Here in the middle, sometimes when I hear it, I like it. Yeah, I love it. I love seeing the different thumbs up, thumbs down. Good that you have an experience with it, because you probably have an idea or an understanding of what that means. Sometimes people use that phrase, it's all good, it's all God, and something terrible will happen. And they'll just look right at you and go, it's all good, it's all God, right? Sometimes it'll be used to jump over whatever an experience is. And it can actually invalidate the human condition. It can invalidate the feeling and the learning of an experience by saying, oh, it's all good, it's all God, right? But there is more to that phrase than meets the eye. It's all good, it's all God. So what does it mean? What doesn't it mean? To me, it's all good, it's all God means this. It means that God is in everything, in and through and as everything. And if I step into my power of vision, my power of sight, my power of understanding, wisdom, interpretation, I can find the good in it. I can also become the good in it. I can act as the good in it, and I can let the good act in and through and as me, interacting with outer circumstances. But what it doesn't mean to me is that I can look at something in the outer world that is causing suffering or pain and go, hey, that's good. That's good. Don't worry about that's good. It's all God. It's all moving into something and it's all good. To me, that can be a little band-aid that can separate us from the human condition and the human experience. And we're here alive in bodies to have a human experience. So Paul Hasselbeck, who is one of Unity's teachers of today, and he is known for afflicting the comfortable. So the moment you feel like you have an idea that you know what it is and you're safe in your spiritual beliefs, he kind of pokes around and prods a little bit. But he teaches his students not to call things good, not to look at the thing and call it good. He has an idea that that is what you can get from everything. So he tells us to pause on the word good, not call an evil thing or something that we see that is great error, not to look at it and say that's good, and to remember that we are the good in everything. God is the good in everything. That means that when there is a horrific storm, when there are incredible fires, God is the activity of love radiating through that, bringing people together. God is the harmonizing faculty, creating peace in those experiences and creating good from them. But the activity of the thing happening itself, we don't need to identify as good. Now, you as a spiritual practitioner have wherever you fall with that phrase and that quote and that idea. And I invite you to honor where you are with it and also explore the idea of expanding your notion of it. We are the faculty of God expressing in and through and as everything. And in that way, because of that truth, everything has the potential for good. And this isn't la good. This is capital G good God. So, are we fulfilling the principle that God is everywhere present all of the time, that God is omnipresence itself, it's omnipotence, and it's inexhaustible? Well, I think that we are if we look at everything we see around us and we choose growth, we choose learning, and we choose love. So when we decide how we want to experience the outer conditions and outer reality, and we choose to experience them through the lens of learning, we activate our God qualities, we activate our highest potential. Have you had a liberating moment that in any sense of the word, you and anyone else would call it bad? Might call it awful. It may have been laced with suffering. It may still bring up a tear in your eye or a little contraction. But it was also a liberating moment because there was so much learning from it. And you wouldn't necessarily call that thing good, but the line has become blurred now. If someone asks you, was that good or was that bad? You know, you might say some things about the thing or the experience itself. Yeah, they were bad, but I can no longer separate the bad from the good because I grew so much from this experience. Or because I shed a skin or a shell that was covering me that I didn't even know I had the invitation to outgrow. And without this heartbreaking or shell breaking or skin shedding event, I might be still that person. I might be that person that was walking around in that way without this awareness, without this expansion, without this sense of love, without this compassion, without this beingness and this perspective or this perception that I show up with that I value so much. And in that, I can't really even ask or answer the question, would I do it again or was it worth it? I can't even go there because it is so whole now. It is so whole now that I am simply in gratitude for where I am now and the gifts of the learning, the love, and the lessons. Liberating moments. Susan Jeffers talks about a woman who loses everything in a fire, loses her house in a fire, and has this concern that she is going to lose everything of value in this fire. And the woman describes it as a liberating moment, saying that she thought she would lose everything, but what she gained was the greatest sense of freedom, and something that would threaten everything that you think you adore and you think has meaning can actually free you in a way that you could not be free, that other people couldn't even understand, right? Unless they lived through what you lived through. You have something like that, or a load of things like that, where if you could just capture it in a movie that you could offer to humanity or offer to a beloved that you see struggling with something that you know, they no longer need to feel caged by, you would offer it. But we can't always, because it's our liberating experience. Sometimes heartbreak is like that. Sometimes heartbreak is so deep and so full and so complete that we know we can never be crushed again, hurt again, in pain again at that depth, because we've gone to the depths of that type of pain or that aspect of the human condition. Whether it's loss, whether it's your heart, whether it's your relationships, whether it's your own self-worth, whether it's healing from abuse. You've been through something and you have found what cannot be taken away. And that is liberating. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're glad something happened, but it means that we chose to rearrange our minds, or we had them rearranged by the experience, to see the benefit, to see the good, to get the good, and we claimed it. And we allowed it to generate within ourselves a new being, like scripture refers to, become a new being in an expanded form. That's what the Christ itself is. The Christ itself is the self without attachment, the self without labels, without identities, without form. It is the highest part of ourselves as individuals and the collective Christ, the collective awakened one. It is the one within us that is beyond shape, beyond form, beyond time. Always available and accessible. And sometimes those liberating moments serve as reminders of who we are. Susan Jeffers says that we can find the beauty or we can lament the loss. We can find the beauty or we can lament the loss. And I really think that at the depth, that is what the unity phrase, it's all good, it's all God, means. I think it can come off as superficial, and it can come off as metaphysical malpractice where we don't use it on ourselves. But if we breathe into the underbelly of it, and we ask and we say, show me that principle, show me that truth, we can find that we can rearrange our minds, or we can have our minds rearranged to see the benefit and the good in everything and and like, really, if you think about your life and the lives of others, what else could be a greater dedication to come from suffering than to look straight at it and say, I will find the good in this. I will create good from this. I will use every bit of this to allow the God flow to move in me, through me, and as me in greater ways. I will not allow this suffering, this moment, this outer condition to be in vain. I will not allow it to be the soundtrack of my life, or the soundtrack of my community, or the soundtrack of my country or my world, whatever it is for you, fill in the blank. The soundtrack will not be forever lamenting the loss, but it will be finding the beauty and finding the blessing. We can get stuck in the loss. We can get stuck in the suffering And it can become the lens through which all else filters. It can become the lens through which we experience everything. And then we can start building that up, the idea of a loss and a pain body, or a self that is just in pain in this human condition. Or we can allow the difficult times, the bad things, to be what they are, and to become the fragrance and the beauty and the richness of life, to become that which regrounds and recenters us, to become that that shows us, what we want, so that we can be more on purpose, so we can know what we stand for, so we can know what we value, so we can know the power of all the rest of the moments that might not be as saturated in suffering. Can you feel that? People that have experienced great suffering often have an unwillingness to participate in extensive drama. They often have an unwillingness to stay stuck in a problem. Sig Paulson, probably my favorite Unity author. Maybe, probably. Sig says this: as love expands its operation in our lives, we are lifted more and more into the harmony of the universe, and a new order is developed in our experience. We are plugged into the source of all good, the light, the love of our inner being, and we are no longer so dependent on other people or certain set patterns in the outer world for our happiness. This does not mean that we do not appreciate others or the outer world. In fact, we will appreciate them more, because we no longer have to expend quite so much energy trying to enforce our tight little patterns of order, what we think is right or wrong, on them. We no longer have to pass judgment quite so often or violently on the appearances and disappearances in the outer scene. I'll read that part again. We no longer have to pass judgment quite so often or violently on the appearances and disappearances in the outer scene. Our sense of order becomes less rigid. It acquires a flexibility that enables us to flow with life rather than fight our way through a world that seems intent on going its own way, particularly when we try to hold it in a certain pattern of behavior or stability. That's something to digest and metabolize, isn't it? It's rich and there's a lot there. But I think it speaks to our spiritual condition and its liberation from the human condition. Susan Jeffers says, you don't worry as much about the future when you know you can handle everything. And she talks about our inner power and how much of our control is in our inside world. She says, you don't worry as much about the future when you know you can handle anything. I just feel like that is one of the most liberating phrases, just that right there. Don't we all just want to know we can handle what comes? And if we know that, then we're a little more okay with not knowing what that's going to look like. And knowing some of it we're going to call good and some of it we're going to call bad. She says, it stands to reason that knowing what the future holds isn't as important when you know you can handle it all. When we know we can enrich our lives with anything that happens to us, good or bad, all is well. Knowing that we can enrich our lives with everything and anything. So when we look at outer conditions or outer circumstances, can we look at them and not from a place of just being passive, not from a place of going, I hate this, or this is driving me crazy, or this concerns me, or I have fear over this, or I just want this to stop, it's bad, it's wrong. can we look at it and determine, not I hope I can enrich my life from this, but I declare I will enrich my life from this. I will enrich the lives of others from this. I will create a world that works for all from this. I will be the faculty and the energy and the creativity of God in this, declaring this truth, period. That is what I stand for. That is what I live for. That is what my being moves through this expression of creativity and creation for. She goes on to talk about having little control about the outside, but much control over our inside world. She says, you might be surprised to learn that the scientific term chaos refers to an underlying interconnectedness that exists in apparently random events. John Briggs and David Peat tell us that chaos science focuses on hidden patterns, nuance, and the sensitivity of things, and the rules for how the unpredictable leads to the new. How the unpredictable leads to the new. She goes on to say, when you can think of chaos as a pattern emerging, you can understand how it's actually happening perfectly. Thinking this way makes it so much easier to relax, sit back, and watch the pattern and the plan emerge instead of feeling vulnerable to the seeming chanciness of all life. Can you now see that if you can turn your worry about all the uncertainty that envelops you into a sense of excitement and possibility, your experience of life will be greatly improved. She says, if you can step out of the drama and watch the miracle of life unfold, you can ultimately see that uncertainty truly is creativity in action. Uncertainty is creativity in action. She says, when we learn how to embrace the learning, we have the guarantee that we are never at the negative effect of circumstances. Rather, we are at the positive effect of whatever happens to us. We are at the positive effect of whatever happens to us because we make sure that happens. We are committed to making sure that happens. And we can train ourselves and our minds to look for the learning, to look at things and embrace the learning. You know, there's a lot of conversations that I have heard and that are in our world around the environment, right? And taking care of the environment. And there are these ideas that there is extreme climate change or there's not extreme climate change. And the science says this and the science says that. And the facts are this and the facts are that. The hypothesis is this, hypothesis is that. I always find it really interesting, the conversation around the environment, because I see it in a few different ways. One is that regardless of what you think is happening, that's almost irrelevant. It's almost irrelevant, right? Because who doesn't want clean air, clean water? Who doesn't want mountains of garbage not to be created, right? All of these things that we do when we interact with the environment, when you talk about emissions from vehicles and from corporations, right? Who wouldn't want less emissions? Who wouldn't want that to not be happening so that we have cleaner air, right? And then if you really look at our practice with the environment, I really think it's a metaphysical practice. The environment and what we see in God creation, right? The source creating what it does and how it operates when we don't jack it up with however we show up. We can look at the environment as a model for the grand overall design God, as a model for how God does things, and allow that to teach us how we are to do things. And in God's creation, nothing is wasted. There is no trash. There is no pollution. You know, everything is this cycle of being utilized and working together. Everything is a harmonious creation. Everything depends on everything else. Everything is worthy and important in the system. You can't affect one part of the system and expect another part to thrive, right? There are so many lessons in nature. And the biggest lesson, I think, in nature is that I think it is our school, our teacher, in how we are to live. How we treat the environment shows how much we understand about God, about how we are to treat each other, about how we are to treat ourselves. The environment is an incredible learning model about how to care for life, how to care for life in all of its forms. When we model the environment, we model God. When we see the effects of ourselves on the environment, we see the effects of ourselves when we're in alignment or when we're out of alignment. And a lot of the effects on the environment right now, we can call bad, of how we are showing up for it. We can call them bad, but we have a model to learn from. And I really believe that if we learn from it and we grow from it, if we love the creation of nature itself, and we watch it and we learn it, we will find the highest forms and the highest models of how to do life sustainably on the planet, of how to live with more than enough, of how to create and recreate in ways that bless all beings and bless the environment, how to create harmony and balance. If we take that opportunity. So whether we're here to save the environment or the environment is here to save us is yet to be determined. But the environment has the potential to save humanity if we're willing to get the good from it, if we're willing to learn from it, if we're willing to listen to it. It will save us from ourselves and teach us how to care and how to create. Susan Jeffers tells us to set our sights on learning everything we can. She says that we are here to be learning. I believe that it is part of our soul growth to learn and expand. And it's ours to focus on this learning, to expand ourselves, to expand our minds, to expand creation. And we have a Bible all around us. It's not contained within the cover or the binding of a book. The Bible is all around us. It is in Mother Earth. It is in how we care for each other. It is in how we co-create. And we can look at just about anything and everything to see the patterns, to learn the patterns. There's a quote that I want to share, and it's about moving from the primitive mind to the enlightened mind. Because we only move from the primitive mind to the enlightened mind through learning and through love and through expansion. Through claiming the good and becoming determined to be the good in everything. It goes like this. Primitive societies live by the rule of might, and the strong prevail. Advanced societies live by the rule of law, and the privileged prevail. Enlightened societies live by the rule of love, and everyone is lifted higher. Laws alone lift no one. Love does that. Susan Jeffers says, as we focus on the love, learning, and growing that can come from it all, we actually become less afraid, knowing that we will come out stronger and more alive with the possibility of becoming a more meaningful part of the world. each of us in our own way. Namaste. So, friends, when we presence our outer world and we have the temptation of calling everything bad, are we willing to also apply the spiritual practice of learning? So will you look at outer conditions and say, what are we learning from this? What am I learning from this? What am I learning about people's minds? What am I learning about the brain and how people learn? What am I learning about our systems? What am I learning about intentions? What am I learning about fear? What am I learning about faith? What am I learning about judgment? What am I learning about power versus force? What am I learning about motivation? What am I learning about beliefs and norms and reality, might, power, love, law? What am I learning? And start soaking it in. Start diving into the learning and at least match the discord with the learning, right? At least with the aggravation, say, bring in learning that is more than this aggravation. Don't just let the aggravation that is bound to be there from the outer conditions. Don't let it be in vain. Claim the learning. What am I learning about the human condition and the heart, the power of community, the power of love? And can I apply this practice of saying, how is this growing me? This too shall pass, and I can learn from this.